In the heart of Massachusetts, nestled among the shadowy pines of the Berkshire Mountains, lies a tale so chilling it has curdled the blood of those who've dared whisper it. This is my encounter with the ghastly apparition known as the White Wraith of the Berkshires, a story that claws at the fringes of reality, threatening to pull the unwary into its nightmarish grasp. It began on an unseasonably cold October night. The moon, a slender crescent, barely pierced the thick canopy of the ancient forest that bordered my family's property. I was returning from a late evening of work in the neighboring town, the kind of work that leaves your bones weary and your spirit longing for the warmth of home. The dirt road that led to our secluded homestead was familiar, yet on that night, it seemed to stretch into eternity, swallowed by an impenetrable darkness. As I rounded a particularly narrow bend, the headlights of my truck sliced through the fog that had begun to settle like a living entity upon the land. It was then that I first saw it, a figure, impossibly tall and unnaturally thin, its skin a ghastly white that seemed to absorb the feeble light around it. It stood motionless at the edge of the forest, its eyes, if it had any, hidden in the shadow of its elongated head. A shiver of primal fear shot through me, rooting me to the spot, my hand frozen on the steering wheel. Compelled by a mix of terror and intrigue, I slowed the truck to a halt. The engine's idle rumble was the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone silent. The creature, if I could even call it that, remained still, its presence an affront to nature itself. The air grew colder, my breath forming clouds of vapor that momentarily obscured my view. When it cleared, the creature had vanished, leaving no trace of its existence, save for the dread that now filled my heart. I pushed the encounter to the back of my mind, attributing it to the exhaustion and the tricks the shadows play in the dim light. Yet, as the days shortened and the nights grew longer, reports began to surface throughout the county. Livestock found mutilated, their bodies drained of blood, colossal footprints, unlike any animal known to roam the Massachusetts wilderness, and tales from the old-timers of a curse laid upon the land by a witch who once dwelled within these woods, her spirit seeking vengeance in the form of a spectral giant. The sightings became more frequent, the descriptions more terrifying. It was said to move with unnatural speed, its gaunt form gliding silently through the trees, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. No one dared venture into the forest after dark, and an oppressive atmosphere of fear settled over the community. Driven by a need for answers and a desire to protect my family, I enlisted the help of a local historian with knowledge of the region's dark folklore. Together, we uncovered ancient texts that spoke of a creature born of the forest's wrath, a guardian of the land that would rise to repel those who desecrated its sanctity. It was known as the White Wraith, and it had been awakened. Armed with this knowledge and a determination that bordered on folly, I ventured into the forest one moonless night, my only companions a flashlight and the pounding of my heart. Hours passed as I navigated the treacherous terrain, every snapped twig sending shocks of fear through my weary body. It was deep within the heart of the forest that I found it. Or perhaps, it found me. The White Wraith loomed before me, taller and more terrifying than I could have imagined. Its body was a mass of twisted limbs, its face a void from which there was no escaping the gaze I felt but could not see. I stood frozen, not in fear but in awe of the entity before me. It was not just a creature. It was the forest itself, its anger, its sorrow, its protector. Without a word, it vanished, leaving behind a silence that was somehow louder than any sound I'd ever heard. I returned home that night, changed in a way I still struggle to understand. The sightings stopped and life slowly returned to normal, but the legend of the White Wraith of the Berkshires lives on, a reminder of the ancient, unknowable forces that dwell just beyond the veil of our understanding. This encounter, etched in the deepest recesses of my mind, serves as a chilling testament to the mysteries that lurk in the shadows of our world, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves. In the heart of Massachusetts, among the whispering pines of the Berkshire Mountains, the White Wraith watches, a guardian of the threshold between our world and the unknown. Incorporating the visceral elements of fear and the surreal nature of the encounter, elevates the tale to a nightmarish crescendo, transforming it into an experience that grips the psyche with cold, unrelenting fingers. As I faced the ghastly apparition on that fog-shrouded road, a detail I had initially repressed in my terror clawed its way to the forefront of my consciousness, the rancid stench that enveloped the creature like a cloak. It was a smell of decay, of death long forgotten in the damp earth, so potent that it seemed to strip the very oxygen from the air. And then, the eyes, those infernal, glowing red orbs that pierced the darkness from one moment high up in the trees, to the next directly in front of me, as if it were toying with the very concept of space and time. In a panic, I threw my truck into reverse, the tires screeching in protest as I desperately tried to turn around on the narrow, forgotten road that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. It was as though I had slipped into another reality, a twisted mirror of our world where the rules of logic and physics no longer applied. Despite my yells and the blaring of my horn, the creature advanced, each step sending waves of dread crashing over me. Unable to bear the sight of it coming closer as if drawn by my fear, I did something I had never imagined myself capable of. I abandoned my truck and fled. My feet carried me down to a nearby brook, the underbrush tearing at my claws as I sought to put any distance between myself and that harried creature. And then, as suddenly as it had all begun, silence fell. The oppressive fog seemed to retreat, the rancid smell dissipated, and the red eyes vanished. It was gone. My heart pounding against my ribs, I sprinted back to my truck, the vehicle now seemingly miles away from where my terror-stricken flight had begun. With a haste born of pure adrenaline, I turned the truck around and floored the accelerator, the engine roaring in response. I drove with such reckless speed that I nearly collided with a pair of deer that darted across the road, their eyes caught in the headlights before they disappeared into the night. As I made my escape from that accursed back road, the reality of my surroundings gradually reasserted itself. The familiar landmarks of a home came into view, each one a lifeline pulling me back from the brink of the unimaginable. Yet even as I returned to the safety of the known world, the memory of that encounter lingered, a shadow cast over my soul. The White Wraith of the Berkshires, with its rancid stench and those haunting red eyes, had imprinted itself upon my very being. The experience, a harrowing journey through fear and the unknown, left me with more questions than answers. What was that creature? A guardian of the forest, a spectral entity, or something far more ancient and unknowable, and why had it chosen to reveal itself to me? These questions remain unanswered, the encounter a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie in the dark corners of our world, just beyond the reach of understanding. In the dead of night, when the fog rolls in thick and the wind whispers through the trees, I find myself listening, half in dread, half in fascination, for the sounds of something moving just out of sight, watching from the darkness with glowing red eyes.